Councilman Gordon.
Here.
Mr. Arnold.
Here.
Ms. Bell.
Here.
Brown. Ms. Carter. Ms. Clark.
Here.
Dr. Elhai. Here. Ms. Friedman.
Here.
Ms. Harding.
Here.
Ms. Howe.
Here.
Ms. Mendoza Locke. Here. Ms. Rodriguez. Dr. Stop. Major White. Here.
Now we'll have the recognition of visitors, beginning with Rich.
Ian Smith, Arrowhead.
Determination of items to be removed from the consent agenda. Meeting minutes from January 21st. The treasurer's report, December, fiscal year 2025 financial statements. Fiscal year 2026 provider agreement approval. Fiscal year 2026 100-day notices approval.
We need to remove that.
Please.
Consent.
And Danny's place, update, acceptance and allocation of additional amounts, community capital funds, furniture and furnishings, RFP award, and finally the health officer's designation. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exclusion of item number?
So moved. Second.
Seconded. We have the roll call.
Mr. Albright.
Yes.
Mr. Arnold.
Yes.
Ms. Bell.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Dr. Elhai.
Yes.
Ms. Friedman.
Yes.
Ms. Harding.
Yes.
Ms. Howe.
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza Locke. Yes. Major White. Yes.
Fiscal year 2026 120-day notice.
We'll turn that over to Elijah.
Hey, good afternoon. You'll remember this discussion from last week. We pulled the 120-day notices from the consent agenda because there has been one slight change. Ohio Guidestone has returned their letter accepting the changes to POS that we had sent the providers. So we no longer need to include that in 120 days. So we'll be pulling that motion and the letter will not be going out to them because everything's been accepted. All the other motions still stand. And you can approve those based on our previous conversation. Just note that we won't be sending Ohio Guidestone a letter for the POS changes. And you can find that specific one in the middle of page 16, yes.
Any questions?
I'd also like to ask that the final one be removed. We can take them all at once except for the final motion on the bottom of page 17.
You just want to take that one separately, right?
Please.
Final motion. Last motion. All right.
I move with the language that's been asked to have the two. Second.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Albright.
Yes.
Mr. Arnold.
Yes.
Ms. Bell.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Dr. Elhai.
Yes.
Ms. Friedman.
Yes.
Ms. Harding.
Yes.
Ms. Howe.
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza Lot,
Yes.
Major White.
Yes.
All right, it's approved. Now for the last one.
So moved. Second.
Roll call vote.
Mr. Albright,
Yes.
Mr. Arnold,
Abstain?
Ms. Bell,
Yes.
Ms. Clark,
Yes.
Dr. Elhai,
Yes.
Ms. Friedman,
Yes.
Ms. Harding,
Yes.
Ms. Howe,
Yes.
Ms. Mendoza Lot,
Yes.
Major White.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes, motion approved. All right, Scott, the director's report.
Okay, I'm gonna start out, I have 4, maybe 5 topics to talk about. I do want to remind folks about the 120-day appeal process. So you just approved the 120-day notices. Those letters will be going out most likely by the end of the week. They have to arrive at least 120 days in advance of the end of the contract period, which is July 1. So it's okay to send them out this week. Agencies then have until April 30th to appeal locally, meaning they can tell us, hey, we'd like you to reconsider your decision and here's why. We will also we usually send out an email to them saying, hey, if you're planning on appeal, you don't have to tell us what you're appealing right now, but just give us an idea if you are going to appeal. That way we can start to plan for sequencing into our existing meetings, a time to present a resolution to any appeals that may appear over the next 2 months. Once we receive an appeal in writing, board staff will evaluate that appeal and we will set a meeting with the agencies, staff to staff. And we'll discuss what the grounds of the recommendation and approval and then what their appeal is. We'll attempt to negotiate any resolution that we might have available. And then we'll make a recommendation to the agency. Okay, board staff are willing to recommend X. Or board staff disagree with your recommendation or your appeal. We're going to recommend that no changes to the board. We'll present that information to you. And normally, we will present that information to you, but also at the same time, we will tell the agency, if you disagree with what board staff are recommending to your appeal, you have the right to ask for a board-to-board meeting. So we'll sequence, if they say, yes, we'd like to meet, then we will sequence them and schedule them in to our existing board meetings. Planning and oversight or our regular board meeting, depending upon how many there are. Starting in the end of March and then going through the first week in April and then the third week in April where we'll have all those resolved. The board staff will write all that up, the appeal. We'll give you the grounds for the appeal. And we will reinforce what our recommendation was in relation to the appeal. At a board-to-board meeting, that's your time to talk directly with their board or whoever's going to be presenting their case to you and ask questions and make a decision in real time on what you would like done with that appeal. Typically at that point, board staff would not weigh in anymore. We've already made our recommendation. It's now up to the board and you all to negotiate out or hold firm, however you decide you think that should go. You render the decision via a motion. in the public meeting, and that becomes locally our final decision. Now, I say that locally because the 120-day appeal process is a two-part process. The first 60 days are local considerations, meaning the local appeal process directly to us. If the agency still doesn't agree with your decision after a board-to-board meeting, for instance, they can actually appeal to the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. Ohio MAS can require non-binding arbitration. They cannot override your decision. So they can say, okay, let's get an arbitrator, you guys split the costs, because that's in the rule, and see if we can come to some agreement, but it's non-binding. And to date, we've never seen Ohio MAS get involved in a local decision. But there is always that potential. We have all new administration at the department. They've not been through this process yet. So we don't really know exactly what might occur, but this process, as of today, is replicating itself over the other 49 boards throughout Ohio as well. So we're all doing the same 120-day notice process right now. So Ohio MAS can either require us to go through non-binding arbitration. They can reach out to us and say, okay, what's going on, and try and negotiate another way, but none of it is binding. And in the end, most of the times they'll just go, no, we're not going to take a position. And then that becomes the final decision. Your decision becomes the final decision. And we notify the agency, and that final decision informs the FY26 contract. So that's the process that we've gone through before. Just so you're aware, I always encourage the agencies to appeal. I want them to be heard. We will talk with them extensively before we actually issue a recommendation, but throughout time, the new information can emerge. If they don't appeal, the decision stands, and that's it. They have until April 30th to appeal locally. And they can do it anytime they're, between now and April 30th. However, if they do it after our final meeting, we're under no obligation to pull a meeting together. So, board recommendation would stand, or we would negotiate an extension into May to waive that original 60-day period. We've done that in the past. We always try and understand where they're coming from, and understanding that the idea behind our recommendations are typically to ensure the maximization of the resources. That also includes, quality improvement, assuring the number of people are served, and, our priorities are being met. We have a rather unique time now where we also have some changing priorities or shifting priorities to assure we have enough resources for crisis treatment and housing services. So, we take this very seriously. I've seen, you guys take this very seriously too. But I do say all the time that this is probably one of the most important things that we will do as a board, because it informs what we're going to fund for next year. And that's about $28 to $30 million worth of stuff. So it's important work. So that's the process for a 120-day notice. I don't think we can explain it enough because it is fairly complicated. Yes, ma'am.
Understanding that we've got new representatives and people in positions at Ohio MAS, and understanding the process, I guess my question is, if we get to the non-binding arbitration, and let's say hypothetically, there's something that comes out of that process that you and or staff be interested in, does it come back to the board
Yeah.
for us to consider that and vote on it?
Yes, it would come back to the board. Because you're the ultimate arbiter of the decision. We, board staff do not make these decisions, you do. So there's something of, a value that comes out of that, and it just seems reasonable, logical, in the best interest of everybody. Yes, we would present that back to the board at one of our meetings for final approval.
Thank you.
So that's one item that I wanted to make sure that we just touched on. I know I explained it briefly the other
A
couple.
couple of questions. Can the agency skip the board-to-board process and go straight to OMAS?
I believe they can.
Makes sense.
I don't think it would be wise, but I
Well.
believe they can. Normally, because throughout this whole process, according to what I understand, Ohio Moss has only involved itself once in a local decision related to funding across the whole state. Mind you, this happens hundreds of times, or maybe even thousands of times throughout the state. It's rare that it would ever get to Ohio Moss. We don't, even locally here, I think we've only experienced it once, maybe twice, and then Ohio Moss has said, no, we're not getting involved. But yeah, I think I think their chances of having a better negotiation locally than, especially when we're talking about local funds, by the way. If they want to tell us what to do with their state funds, well, then they can allocate that, right? They can tell us, do this with your local fund or our state funds. But telling us what to do with local funds gets a little, I think you'd see a little more pushback. I don't know if that's ever been contemplated. They could wait until the last day, April 29th, and appeal locally, which gives us literally one day to make a recommendation. And normally what we would do, and we've seen that happen, where we would say board staff aren't supportive, and that's it. Largely because you waited for so long. There was a valuable conversation to be had. It should have been had 45 days ago. And I guess that's the other little nuance. We say 60 days, but it's really 45 days because we got to have all the information ready to present to you in a packet in mid-April. So that's the little nuances of the 120-day process. I did want to talk a little bit about Danny's Place because I told you we'd give you an update on the operator RFP. That closes on Friday. The RFP closes on Friday, so proposals are due. Mr. Jones is overseeing the review process. The review committee will consist of 2 trustees, I believe 2 staff, representatives from the Northwest Ohio Behavioral Health or Behavioral Hospital, Northwest Ohio Behavioral Healthcare, NOBH, the state hospital. NAMI Ohio, and then we have 2 representatives from the regional boards. Let's remind ourselves that this is a regional project. Although it seems like we might be doing all the work. But nonetheless, it is a regional project. And so the goal would be to have a recommendation to this board for approval at our April meeting. So you might not see it on the April P&O, but it's more likely to be a walk-on, a non-consent agenda item at the April board meeting. So that's our plan. And then we want that contract to start immediately because they're going to need to ramp up, start to hire people, get them trained, things like that. As I said at the last meeting, there's paint on walls, and they're painting walls as we speak. The $700,000 new dollars that we got from Ohio Moss went a long way in closing the construction budget gap, but a construction budget gap still exists. And I'm estimating right now with feedback from our owner's rep that we're at about a $50,000 gap. Some of that is driven by the fact that Toledo or First Energy told us that the electric drop was at one place, so we had the conduit ran to that, and it turns out it's 400 feet away. So we're trying to figure out what that cost is going to be, and that is estimated somewhere between 25 and 40,000. Because you got to get a new site survey, you got to do easements, you got to do all that stuff that just slows the project down. And our construction manager, Lathrop, in my opinion, has done a tremendous job. They've kept this project on time, on target, without having any electric at the site. They've been running everything off generators and portable heaters, which they've experienced theft with major pieces of equipment and minor pieces of equipment, which caused us to move some, we needed additional security for the space, which also raised the cost as well. I say all that to just understand that our private fundraising efforts are not done. We need to move forward on those. The budget gap is very doable. And hopefully we can shrink that a little bit, or we'll get good news on the electric, the cost of that, so that we aren't too far away. But if we set our sights on a private fundraising of about 50,000, I think that we should do it.
So what?
I'm taking my
Yesterday.
Yeah. So the bills, as Jenny can attest to, they're starting to pour in now. They are on time to turn the building over to us in the end of June. Then there are, the building has to be commissioned. So that might, according to what I'm being told, anywhere between 30 and 60 days. We got to get the provider in there as well, and the provider needs to set up their infrastructure for operation, so they got to get their IT system set up and all of that. Now we'll have the bones in there for it, but to have them actually have that system in place. Then they got to develop security protocols and just stock the facility, things like that. So anytime between now and October, when I think October's at the very latest would be opening, probably more closer. My guess would be September, but there's quite a bit to do between now and then.
What agency goes in there and gives them accreditation, like a joint commission would be for a hospital?
So the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services is the accrediting or the licensing or certification body. Any of the providers that would bid on this project would have to have some level of national credential, CARF or JCAHO or ACO, is it? Council on Accreditation, yeah. So Ohio MAS no longer certifies entities that are not nationally accredited. So everybody has to have that national accreditation.
So at what point do providers start showing interest in this?
Well, the RFP is already out there. So if they don't respond by the end of this week, then they won't be considered for operating the facility. So the RFP's been out for 6 weeks already. Yes, ma'am.
So the electrical thing, was that in writing from them? That it was
Well,
gonna be here?
They point on a map and say it's in this general vicinity.
So we can't make them pay part of it?
They're not gonna pay for it. If you wanna spend time trying to force First Energy into paying that, I mean, that's probably something that none of us have the time to do. And if you wanna delay the opening of the facility, which will end up costing more money, I mean, it's probably not. I think the best thing we might be able to do is maybe negotiate a lower amount. But remember, the work that is being done to move that is not First Energy work. It's the contractor's work. So they have no incentive to lower our price, right? And so I never have I done construction before. But my sense is this is the way it goes. Sometimes. things out of
I
I have a
That's
friend
why
that
you
was
have a
building a house.
contingency.
Which is, and we do have contingency, but we've burned through some of that already.
I have a friend that was building a house and they did the same thing and it ended up costing them $8,000. And there was nothing, and they fought and they still didn't.
So
So,
thankfully, it's all state land around there, state or federal land, so we don't think we're gonna have a problem with the easements. We just gotta identify the easements and then work that process to get the stuff through there. We've already, there's a road that goes through, we've already bored, directional bored under the road. So that's not a problem, it's really just along the easement and then back into where the drop is going to be. So I just look at it as one of those unfortunate things that I wish it wouldn't have occurred. Or if it would have occurred, it would have occurred last August when we were trying to get electrical as opposed to 6 months later. We're there. So I also wanted to give you an update on what everybody seems to be talking about right now around the state budget. So in January 28th, I actually went and met with all of our state representatives and senators down in Columbus on our state association budget priorities. They included a dedicated line in the budget for boards. We call it the 421 line. It requested a streamline in the allocation process to provide us more local flexibility. So instead of giving us all these individual pots of money and saying, you need to do this with it, and this is the reporting mechanism, give us the amount in a pool, tell us what are the high level things you want to do with what you want us to do with it. Let us formulate the local plan and then standardize the reporting process across all the boards. So that we all report the same things so that you could compare across. It also included modernizing our contracting authority. Remember all that contracting language that we were talking about? And we asked that they protect the 25% of the cannabis, all they say, the adult use cannabis tax revenue. 25% of that revenue was designated for the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. So originally, the original law said the cannabis tax would be 10%, but 25% of that 10% would go to Ohio Mas. We were requesting that of that 25%, half of that be directed specifically to boards to make sure that we get that out to the community. And then there was some other priorities around accessing, updating state regulations around data. If you recall the whole issue of us not getting Medicaid data anymore. to address that issue. Support workforce development, retention, and wellness. So that was when I went and met with the state reps and the senators. So on February 11th, the budget bill dropped. It's called House Bill 96. And it does quite a lot. And I'm gonna high-level summary for you guys. Actually, Ohio Mas listened to us and is suggesting that they provide us greater flexibility with the way they use their funds. And so they presented several buckets of funds to be distributed to boards: prevention and wellness, crisis services, mental health block grants, substance use disorder block grant, recovery supports, criminal justice block grants. In all, I heard the director's testimony to the Senate or the House committee that last week, and she had indicated that it looks like it's about a 2% increase in the amount of funds that would go towards boards. All right, well, that ain't nothing, to be honest with you. We weren't expecting an increase. We were expecting flat or even potentially a decrease. So to hear her say a 2% increase, I think in a budget where a lot of departments are being cut, I think it's one of the best things we're going to be able to do, to be honest with you. Are we satisfied with a 2% increase, assuming that's what we end up with? No, not really, but we'll take it, right? Because it is going to be a fairly tight budget this year. And remember, we have a very conservative legislature. So, yes, sir.
If you were going to lose money or get less money, now they're going to give you an increase of 2%. That's that.
So that if your question is, are we going to see an increase?
Net, yes.
Net increase? Anybody's guess. Because while across the boards, she's saying it's a 2% increase to the boards, that doesn't mean we're going to see a 2% increase. That could mean that the other boards get a certain amount when the methodology is not worked out. That's another thing that's in the budget. The department has to work out a methodology. So there's no guarantee of us actually getting a 2%, but the fact that the pool is bigger is good. In the past, we've seen all different kinds of strategies for these funds. We've seen across the board just based on per capita. We've seen a modified per capita where they take into account like opioid funds, number of overdose deaths, number of Narcan kits distributed, for instance, population, things like that, number of people seeking treatment, and they put that into some kind of methodology. There isn't, Ohio does not have an identifiable methodology when it comes to distributing behavioral health funds to boards. And that has been a rather sore spot for boards for quite a while.
Yeah, that would make sense.
And there's some disincentive to support it because some boards make out, some boards lose. So you create a system of winners and losers, which creates inner conflict in our association. So,
Yeah.
so you might have one entity, one board getting $25 per person, where we receive, I did this math back in 14 and it probably hasn't changed this much. We get like 76 cents per person. So you have one board getting $25 per person. We get 76 cents. Franklin County, Columbus, or Cuyahoga County, Hamilton County, they get less than that. So you see the bigger communities always on the lower end of that per capita, but we're also on the higher end of number of people seeking treatment per capita, below the poverty line, things that, some communities don't experience. So it's always a negotiation. Yes, ma'am.
What if Medicaid funds are cut? What does that do to
We're
our?
all in trouble. All right, so let's just be clear. Just do the math, folks. If Medicaid now covers anywhere between 90 and 97% of all the agency's treatment dollars. All right? We have 2 agencies in our community alone that bill $40 million each. Another one that bills $28 million. And then step down from there. Our budget for treatment services is $6 million this year. There's no way we make that gap up. We don't have the money.
Shouldn't there be some publicity out there saying that? If this happens, this is gonna happen?
Well, this came out on the 11th. There isn't anything in here that would lead us to believe that Medicaid is taking a major reduction. Now, we know on the federal level that that's a different discussion,
Doesn't that affect the states?
yet to be. Nothing has been done yet. Nothing has been proposed. We can't say to you, I can't say to you, this is going to happen. I wouldn't even know what to advocate other than you need to keep expansion in. Right? That's a big deal. Expansion, especially on the substance use side, was a major win for our providers. That time will come, right? We're just not quite there yet. But I can tell you that I did mention, and our state representatives and senators, they're well aware of the value of Medicaid expansion in our community. It might be the more conservative areas that are leading that discussion. I'm always open to recommendations. The budget bill also proposes a name change to the department. Department of Behavioral Health. That's consistent with them changing the hospital's names. Beyond Ohio Moss funding, the bill also doubled the cannabis tax. Remember I said it was 10% and 25% of that was going to go to Ohio Moss? Well, it is now 20%. And they removed all the carve-outs and basically said it could be used for the needs of the state, including law enforcement training, operations, public health and safety, access to justice initiatives, and administrative of the adult use marijuana laws. 14% of it would be directed towards substance use prevention, treatment, recovery programs, and administration of 988, which is the hotline. I think in the end, you might see that more money would go into Ohio Moss because of now 14% of the overall
Versus 10,
versus 25% of the 10%.
right.
So that might not be a bad thing, but getting that money back down into the communities is always something that we're really interested in making sure happens. Also, it creates a number of programs and services such as a pretrial behavioral health intervention pilot, which is directed towards pretrial, adult pretrial offenders with mental health disorders. My feeling is it's targeting that group, Linda, that you have always seemed to have concerns about with individuals that can't get into care and are non-responsive to current treatment efforts. And I think they want to run a pilot for that. I think that's kind of, you get a state budget, guys, and you get a little paragraph to describe a whole big project. So you're left with guessing on some of this stuff. Statewide mobile crisis system for adults and children. We knew that the children side, we knew MRSS was on the children's side. Now they've added in the adult side too, and we're curious to know what the definition is. Is it that 18 to 24, which was covered in MRSS, or is it something else? We need to learn more about all that. Community behavioral health clinics is creating what we call the model of CBCHC, is that MOUSC? CCBHC. It is a
Alphabet
national
soup.
model. It is a national model, evidence-based model that integrates behavioral and physical care. Zeph Center is actually a lookalike FQHC that aligns with the CCBHC model. Harbor's working its way there. Soon, Unison will probably be there as well. But it also gives them an enhanced Medicaid reimbursement rate that would be helpful in the bottom line. So the state's embracing that model where it makes sense. Coordinated specialty care for first episode psychosis. There is a first episode psychosis program now, but they want to add more structure to it. And just so you're aware, usually, kids under 21-ish, they experience their first psychosis, and getting them in structured treatment and on medication and support at the first event, as opposed to waiting 7-8 years later, can dramatically change the trajectory of the illness. And so that's why it's so important to provide and wrap around that support on the first episode. A lot of times people, families, individuals don't even understand what's going on. And so part of that is educating the community and family members of, hey, this is what this might look like. And then encourage care and making that care available. And then transcranial magnetic stimulation, they want to expand that. I know just a little bit about that to be dangerous, but I'll bet I know somebody in who's at this table that knows a little more about TMS than I do. Do you?
Just a little.
Just a little, right? But it's essentially helps with, I believe it's evidence-based practice for people experiencing persistent depression. And exactly the way it sounds, magnets placed strategically to do whatever it does. I'm lost after that.
I could use a couple.
So, but my understanding is it is very effective, but it's not widely available in the public system. As a reminder, just like the 120-day notice, there is a long way between now and a budget being passed. So the committee hearings have already started in the House of Representatives. Those will go on until the House passes its version of the bill by the end of April. It then passes it over to the Senate, who will go through a similar process. with the expectation that the bill will come out of the Senate by mid-June. Now, a lot of times, the Senate will start its hearings even in advance of knowing what the House is going to do. And I would expect that this is no different. But in the end, you're going to have two competing bills, a House bill and a Senate bill. Well, the Senate bill will actually be a substitution bill. That bill will then go to what is called a, what is it called? Reconciliation. And so they do exactly what that is. They reconcile the difference. It's called the conference committee. They reconcile the differences. All of that is public until it gets to the conference committee. And then the conference committee is not a public, there's no Open Meetings Act around that. They reconcile the two bills. Then it goes to the House for reapproval. The House cannot change anything. They can either accept it or reject it. And then it goes to the Senate, same thing, accept, reject. Has to be on the governor's desk for signing by June 30th to take effect July 1. But as we've seen the last couple years, they don't have a budget bill by July 1. So it could be, a week or a month or two late. Well, probably not 2 months, but we've seen it up to I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks late. There will be plenty of time to interject into this process. I guarantee you I will be down there at least once testifying. But I think Linda's point of reiterating and supporting Medicaid expansion is well taken at every opportunity we have. That is the end of my report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Lot to contemplate.
Yeah.
All right, open session, beginning with Richard.
Lot going on at Government Center. Just briefly, as I'm speaking, City Council is having a meeting to decide if they should receive a raise or not. This is a commission put together by City Council. They will make recommendations. Put it this way, if you go down to One Government Center, if you look on the bulletin board there, you'll see meetings for the next 2 months with plenty of advance notice. Not this one. This one was posted at 2:37 on Friday, the day before a 3-day holiday. And it's not even being held in City Council chambers. It's held in the conference room on the 24th floor, which is not very big. Clearly, they don't expect a lot of people to show up. I believe there will be a Blade reporter there, so there might be something in tomorrow's Blade, but they will make a recommendation on whether the City Council and the mayor should receive a raise, and City Council will have to act on that. At tonight's City Council agenda review at 2 p.m., well, once again, they are having quorum problems. They didn't have a quorum. They had to delay the meeting. They had a whole bunch of important stuff to talk about, a number of monetary items. Finally, they had their quorum. And here's a problem. There is a Lucas County Toledo Council on Disabilities. Don't ask me what they do because I don't know. A few months ago, council voted to decrease the number of members because they couldn't achieve a quorum. At tonight's meeting, they were supposed to approve some reappointments. Sam Meldon said he had concerns. He wants to see their minutes for the last year. Then George Saranto chimed in. He said, I want to see their attendance records for the last few years. It sounds like they're having some problems over there. And there's no shortage of things they could be doing. Recently, City Council had a meeting on the deplorable state of our sidewalks. You could not put a wheelchair over some of these sidewalks. That's exactly the sort of thing they should be doing, and nobody was there. I can't remember the last time I heard anything from the Council on Disabilities, so I don't know what's going on, but it sounds like they're having some severe attendance problems. I wanted to keep you updated on Plan Commission. There were the 2 tobacco shops last week. One of them is on Reynolds. That guy called in, said, I'm out of town. Can I do it next month? They said, sure, no problem. The other is on Glendale with minimal discussion. They said, sure, no problem. You're good to go. And then the meeting came to a grinding halt because we have a lady who's trying to put a healthcare facility at 815 Navarre. This is Western Ohio Health Partners. She gave a great presentation on what they are and what they hope to do, but they will need a zone change, and it's not compatible with the Toledo Forward Plan. They went around and around and around, and they asked her, couldn't you put it somewhere? She said, no, this is the right place for it. And so they said, will you agree to a 30-day deferment? She's already had one community meeting and nobody showed. I think they hope a second meeting, maybe somebody will show up and complain. So she said, sure, I'll agree with that. And then Tom Gibbons said, well, we've got about 20 items on the agenda for March. How about 2-month deferment? Okay, so they won't hear her again until April, and at the earliest, it would go to City Council in May. It doesn't look good. It looks like they'll vote to turn her down because they do not want to change that zone right there. So it just says something about Toledo that we approve tobacco shops, no problem, but when it comes to a healthcare facility, we make them jump through a bunch of hoops. Indulge me just for a minute. If you look at the February 9th New York Times, it was a Sunday, there is a heartbreaking article there. It is concerning a school shooting that took place in Santa Fe, Texas, 7 years ago. Now, I've got a good memory, but I had to go back to my files to find that one. Oh, it was terrible, all right. It was a young man. His father kept his guns locked up, kept the key hidden, but he found the key, and he went to his school. He shot 23 people, 10 fatally. When I went back and looked it up, I think I know why it was hard for me to remember this one. It was overshadowed by Parkland. That's another school shooting. And that one was big. In fact, there was an article in Toledo's Blade on Sunday about that one. That was the guy in Nicholas Cruz, and he shot 17 people to death in Parkland, Florida. Now, that was the first Trump administration, and Trump was all over it. He went out and he posed for pictures. He prayed with them. It was a great photo op, and he looked very presidential, and he looked very concerned. But of course, that guy shot 17. This guy only shot 10, so that's not enough for another presidential photo op. This one was largely ignored. Now, there were not a lot of attorneys that were willing to take this case because of all the anger. So in Sunday's, the 9th, the New York Times, they looked at the defense attorney. Her name is Lori Laird. She took this unpopular case because she has a stepson with schizophrenia, and she's been through what so many other families have. 1 month after she took it, he committed suicide. She stayed with the case. She worked through her grief and everything. She stayed with the case. And I think the part that really got to me was when it said, when she was addressing the jury, she pointed to her clients and said, that could be me sitting there because I have a son with schizophrenia. Oh, the courtroom erupted into chaos, and the prosecuting attorney jumped up, I object, and the judge agreed and said, you can't do that. She did win the case. They were acquitted, but their lives were turned upside down. And but she said, nobody wins in a case like this. And I wanted to cry. I mean, it just brought back so many memories. For 9 years, I volunteered at the old Boost office. That's what eventually became NAMI. People would come in, people would call. I would sometimes break down into tears when they would tell me their stories of what it's like living with a person with severe mental illness. And in this article, you're seeing the future, because across the country, we're going to have more shootings. We've got no shortage of disturbed young people. We've got no shortage of guns. Anybody can get a gun these days. But I think the word is out that it's better to go after the parents than the school. Schools are very good at defending themselves in court. Parents are not. So we're going to see I believe we're going to see a backlash over the next few years. Anytime there's a school shooting, let's go after the parents. And I've always believed if we help the parents today, then we don't need to prosecute them later on. But it was in the February 9th front page of the New York Times. I highly recommend you read it. It is heartbreaking, but I think this is what we're going to see in the future. More backlash against families with a mental health person. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Meeting adjourned.
Right?